So here I am in conversation with Zoe Sharp, physiotherapist. So just over the coming weeks, we're going to release a few small conversations around the pelvic floor and how important it is to us and what women can look out for, things that they can become aware of that can really help them manage their pelvic floor. So if you had a listen to the conversation I had with Nikki Roger about my situation, you know it took me 7 years to get to a point where I feel like my pelvic floor is really sorted now. I don't really want women to wait 7 years to get sorted. So Zoe here is going to help me to help you understand what you can do. So Zoe, would you like to just introduce yourself to us, please?
So I'm Zoe and I'm a physiotherapist and I am musculoskeletal physiotherapist, and I've been delving into the realm of pelvic floor physio for the last 6 months, which I'm really passionate about, and was really glad to find Frances so we could collaborate on some things.
Yeah, and you're really passionate about women's health, aren't you?
I am,
and
absolutely.
All things to do with that. So, and I'm sure over the coming few sessions we have together, if you carry on listening to us, you'll learn more about Zoe and maybe how you can get some help and support from her as well. So today's conversation is all around the biology of the pelvic floor, where it is and what it does. So I'm going to hand straight over to Zoe and she's going to demonstrate or show us where the pelvic floor is and what it is.
So the pelvic floor sits within the pelvis, and you've got 3 different layers to the pelvic floor. You've got superficial layers on the outside, and then you've got the deeper layers that sit on the inside. So the role of the pelvic floor, you've got 3 different main roles. You've got urinary function, you've got sexual function, and then you've got bowel function. So that's the main points of the pelvic floor and the main jobs of the pelvic floor. And it sits between your pubic bone at the front, and it runs all the way along the bottom of the pelvis to the tailbone, sometimes referred to as a bowl, a sling, or a hammock. Any of those would fit if you have a look at the anatomy for the pelvic floor.
Yeah. So I always, when I talk about it, I talk about it like a sling.
Yeah.
So it runs front to back, side to side.
Yeah.
And it sits kind of holding up, doesn't it? The organs that
It does. It's responsible for supporting all of your kind of organs, reproductive organs, and it also supports the abdominal viscera as well. So when your diaphragm comes down, when you're coughing, when you're running, when there's any kind of pressure going through, the pelvic floor will come up to meet it, so it supports it in that aspect as well.
Good. And it's a muscle, isn't it?
It is.
Like any other muscle in the body?
Like any other muscle in the body, absolutely. It can get stronger, and it can also get weaker in certain times throughout your life as well.
Yeah. And I think we forget that. We forget that it's just a muscle, and because it's out of sight, out of mind, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, muscles in your legs, in your arms, in your chest and back, we know they're there, but because they sit deep in the body, then we can really forget that they're there and forget that they need to be worked, don't they?
Absolutely.
And maintained as much as anything else as well. Okay, so what are the issues? You know, you had a little listen, I think, to the chat I had with Nikki, didn't you?
Yeah.
You know, and I had some ongoing issues for about 7 years, which I think are probably typical stuff that women get. But I'd love to hear from you what you see in your practice. You know, what are the issues that women are coming to you with about their pelvic floor?
Yeah, so normally with the pelvic floor, it tends to come alongside urinary dysfunction. So whether that's leaking, whether that's with stress incontinence, with exercise, with running, or trampoline is one of the biggest ones that you'll hear, or whether it's just leaking at night time, leaking when you're sitting there, or if you're going to the toilet too much, if you can't hold on to a lot of urine and your bladder's not holding on to a lot of urine, so you're going to the toilet 10-15 times a day and you constantly feel like you need to go to the toilet. On top of that, also see a lot of ladies who have a prolapse, which is very common at certain ages in the life. So they're the main patients that I see at the moment for pelvic floor dysfunction.
It's interesting what you say about the frequency need to go to the toilet. Would you include nighttime as well?
Yeah,
needing
absolutely.
to get up? Because I know in the cohort of women I work with, when we talk about hormone decline, often sleep is a real issue, and then layered on top of that then becomes this whole like needing to get up and pee. So they're waking up anyway, or they're being woken by the need to go to the toilet. And I've spoken to some women who can be getting up 10-12 times a night, you know. So would that be classed as quite a significant issue that needs to really be resolved.
Yeah, and it's very common as well. I think we just need to remember that it's normalised for lots of ladies, and that's what we want to make sure we come away from, is that they seek help for that, and that it can be improved, and it's typical and it's common, but it's not a normal function.
Yeah, and I love that, because I know from my generation of women and even younger than me, at the Menopause Cafe I run, I've had women come along who are in their 30s who are telling me, about the bouncing on the trampoline. You're right, that tends to be the first thing. But also that, they any sort of form of jumping or, running or anything, they're feeling that they're leaking urine, and, and they sit and they say, well, we just thought this is what came. We've had babies, we're just getting older, and we thought we'd have to put up with that for the rest of our life. But I'm glad we're on the same page. We don't have to do that, do we?
No, definitely not in this day and age.
No. Takes a bit of work, would you say?
It does. It does take a lot of work and a lot of consistency.
Yeah.
3 to 5 times a day you want to be working your pelvic floor. So it is a lot to remember. However, going to the toilet kind of 15 plus times a day and getting up 3-4 times plus a night is more inconvenient than having to do your pelvic floor exercises, I imagine.
Yeah, and we're going to cover that in a later episode about pelvic floor exercises anyway. So to kind of finalise this, because I want to keep these conversations manageable and brief, but I really would like us to just have a chat about the barriers. So, that lady I talked about who was in her 30s thinking that age is the barrier, that's the thing. But what other barriers would you say that you see in clinic? What do women talk about? Why it's taking them so long to get to see you? Or
yeah, I think it does go back to that normalising of kind of the symptoms, like you say, from your generation or your older generation. It wasn't really spoken about. It was kind of, you just kind of put up with it, just go along with it. You buy yourself a pad. Like in your previous conversation, you just see your pads. It's normalised, but also people don't know where to go for help. They don't know whether it's something you go to the GP about, or if you go to a physio about, or who you should see about it. So it's really important that the information is out there, that you can contact your GP, your health professional, to direct you to the correct place to get help for each different problem that you have.
Yeah. I can remember someone saying to me on my journey that, it's what, to get your pelvic floor or your situation to a point that you're happy with.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not about what someone else thinks is okay. So, 2 ladies might sit and be the best of friends and could talk about their own situation if they dare to talk to each other. Because I think even that, is hard, to even talk to your best mate maybe about what's going on. But it's that whole, what might be okay for you, Zoe, what might be okay for me, they might be totally different things, mightn't they? So
and if you've got lots of friends, or you'd speak to your parents and their friends, and if it's all okay that they leak all of the time, you're going to think it's okay that you leak all of the time, but it doesn't have to be the normal.
No. I just to finish that point, I remember when I went to see the pelvic floor physio that I had paid to see, and I actually said that to her. I said, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm nearly good. It's really, really good, but it's just not quite good enough.
Not quite where you want to be. Yeah.
And I'm like, and I actually said to her, am I asking too much, or am I expecting too much? Should I feel like I've got, and she just went, no. She said, because if that doesn't feel right for you, then we need to kind of consider what next, that we can do. And I think that's what our audience kind of needs to remember, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And everyone's different, like you say. Everyone's personal goals are different. Whereas if you reach out to that healthcare professional, they'll help you reach your individual goals.
Yeah.
Whereas the information where you Google it, it is very general, and it's not suitable for everyone, but it is very, very helpful to go out there and read. Yeah. Sometimes you need that extra bit of personalised help to get you to your goals.
Yeah. Thing around, women getting a pelvic floor check, because you might not get that on the NHS. Until there's an issue. But if a woman wanted to understand how well their pelvic floor was working, then seeing someone like yourself could be a really good thing, couldn't it?
Definitely. And the way that NHS works, it does fight fires. You have a problem, you get it treated. But actually, every other aspect of life, if you wanted to keep yourself strong, you would go to the gym before you lost your strength, for example.
course you would.
And there's no harm in going to look after your pelvic floor strength either, because there's so many different stages in life where your pelvic floor takes extra stress and has to work harder for you, that between those different stages you could go and seek support to make sure that it's doing as much as it can and that you're doing everything you can to look after it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I when I reflect back now, I wish I'd have done that a long time ago, because thinking about, for me, being a really active person, it was like it was done to me. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it happened and then I was on the back foot having to deal with it. Whereas if I'd have dealt with it sooner, then I maybe had never got into some of the difficulties that I got into.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, good point. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's great. So I hope that's been really, really useful. And we're going to talk again, me and Zoe, on the next conversation. So join us again then.